the advantages and threats that they pose. So how does AI work? So AI works by combining large amounts of data with fast iterative processing and intelligent algorithms, meaning that we need to collect a lot of data, information, and the algorithms that we make, which is the AI, repeats the process, goes over and over through the data, and then through this process, this allows the software to automatically find patterns or features from the data, and it can learn from it. So the types of AI. We have machine learning, which is a buzzword right now, where we have different types. We've got supervised machine learning, where we tell it what to do. We've got unsupervised machine learning, where that's another fraction of it, where it's called reinforcement learning. It can learn by itself from the data that it's been given. And then we have deep learning, which is a higher complex level, but we'll speak about that later on in the presentation. So an application advantage of machine learning is recommendation systems. We have Spotify, we have YouTube, we have all these things that learn from what the viewer consumes. And from there, it can find things that it can predict what the consumer might want to watch next, statistically speaking, based on what their other consumers have liked based on what they've watched before. We also have NLP, which stands for natural language processing. So we can extract content. There's machine translation, question answering. For example, everyone asks Alexa and Siri things when you want to speak to someone about a product nowadays. Before you get translated to an actual person, you go through a chatbot. So yeah, that's made things, in terms of companies, they've had to hire less people because for simple tasks, they can automate it through things like chatbots and things like that. We also have machine vision, so machine recognition, image recognition. We have so now machines can recognize things. For example, AI now can tell the difference between what a cat and a dog looks like based on classification algorithms. One of the threats with this type of technology is that it has a problem for botting, because there's one of the main defenses that websites use to stop bots from accessing their websites. And what is that, you ask? That's right. You have to pick the traffic lights, or what you essentially have to do is you have to pick what they ask for. However, because of how unstructured it is, AI cannot do that yet. And it might not even be traffic lights. It could be dogs. It could be lines on the road. It varies. So because of how unstructured it is, AI cannot keep up with that yet. However, once it does, it could pose a threat to security with bots, for example. We also have logistics, where AI calculates the distance of travel, for example, with global trade, where it'll find the most cost-effective route of travel. I'll give you an example where during the lockdown, the global market lost billions because there was a tanker stuck in the Suez Canal. Why did they go through the Suez Canal? Because if they do not go through there could be 2 weeks added to their travel. So looking for the most effective route of transportation saves a lot of money on a global trade scale on the world economy. And robotics, this is the traditional type of thing we'll think about when we're thinking about AI. Whenever we thought about AI, you think of the Terminator, actual hardware. So yeah, that's another type. So industries, AI is being used. We have healthcare. AI applications can be used to personalize medicine and X-ray readings. Illness detection. There's a lot of startups nowadays where it's using AI is being used to locate cancers, and this is from a statistical standpoint, where it analyzes each specific case of the cancer, and from there it can predict earlier on if this person is more likely to develop cancer at a certain time. It can also be used for personal healthcare assistance, remind you to take your pills eat healthier, just live a better lifestyle. And the thing with AI is that we have to focus on is that it is data driven. So the more data we have, the more accurate it is. Um, with healthcare, there's always going to be more scans, more people are going to be ill. So the more data we have, the earlier we can detect it, and the more people we can save. With retail, again, we have recommendation systems similar to what I spoke earlier about YouTube and Spotify. We have banking where AI is really used there because with quantitative finance, speed is the the big thing, the big focus, and this is why they use languages like low level languages like C++. We want precision, we want effectiveness, and with quantitative finance as well and AI there, it's been used to detect fraud, for example, based on the patterns in the data that could suggest that there's fraud, and automate manually intense data management tasks, like, for example, inputting hundreds of thousand rows of data. The next major application of AI would be self-driving cars, where we use computer vision for self-driving cars using something called artificial neural networks. We'll cover that later. The first use case in industry, the main use case in industry where we use this is the Tesla autopilot. What is the benefit of this? There's reduced human error. The AI doesn't get tired on the road. The AI isn't going to use its phone and text. The AI isn't going to drink and drive. And because of that, it's not going to make mistakes like people do. I think even just being human, people make mistakes. So using AI for driving and things like that will ensure that accidents will decrease drastically. However, there is the other side where if there's two people in a car and they're both in fully autonomous vehicles and they crash and one of them dies, who's to blame? Is the person or the passengers in the vehicle to blame, even though they do not even know how their car moves by itself? Or is it the manufacturers where, because of how AI learns by itself with this data, the code that they made 3 years ago might have changed drastically to the point where it might not even be the thing that they created in a sense. So who is to blame? There needs to be there's going to be need a lot of regulation with that. Another benefit, however, is that you could save a lot of budget on policing. Imagine there's in a world where your car won't even move if if you haven't paid your road tax, for example, or your MOT, for things like that. And in terms of speeding, your car's autonomous; it's not going to speed by itself. So police budget can be put into better things. However, one of the threats of this is the hacking potential with electric cars, and that because it's digital, which means there is a possibility for it to be hacked. And when it comes to security in this age, it's a cat and mouse type of cycle. So there are always going to be cars that will get hacked, and will they be able to find out where you live based on where you've been or know where you go? Or could it even be so drastic where someone controls your car so that you crash? Another threat is that of loss of jobs. There's taxi drivers, truck drivers that that is a big part of the economy. And what is the future of Uber? Right now, Uber contract millions of people, give them jobs because they need them. If they have autonomous vehicles, will they need people anymore? Will they need to hire people anymore? So I just wanted to give you a quick insight into the eyes of computer vision, where we have algorithms, we have classification algorithms where it's able to see the difference between a car and a person. And the main difference in how it will do this is just simple algorithms and statistical ways of calculating the difference between lines. We see that in outside of these classifications, there's all this red line where this will be maths, simple maths like differentiation, the maths of lines to basically tell the difference in what an object actually is. And from there, it can tell if this is a straight road, the lines on the road and what it means to turn left or right, things like that. So now deep learning, this is where it gets interesting. before we go into the applications of deep learning, I just wanted to give you a little insight. A lot of the a lot of the greatest inventions that we have nowadays, we've been inspired by nature, because nature is the greatest creator. Whether you think it's God, whether you think it's evolution, everything that we see is inspired from nature. Whether helicopters were inspired by dragonflies, was it a stealth bomber? I think was inspired by an owl that's silent because of how its wings but bounce sound off it so that it can't be detected. The same way here, one of the things that are going to change the 21st century forever is based off the brain. Us as humans, that is our most powerful thing. So what we have here is, with our brain, we have neurons that translate information and relay it. And then we've done this in a digital format where we have weights. That's what the W stands for. And there's all these combinations that these weights can transfer data. And from there we can actually it can translate data in different ways. And the combinations of these layers, this is a simple one, get very complex very quickly, and the computing power, it increases exponentially. So we've covered some of the uses like self-driving cars, photo descriptors. We have pixel restoration. So if you have a picture that um, can't be restored, I mean, that has low resolution, you can restore it with AI. Covered NLP. Um, we've covered it can colorize black and white images. One of the threats with NLP and language processing with things like Alexa and Siri is that there's been a lot of lawsuits with Apple where they listen to what you say, and they say that this is to train their data, but it gets a bit gray in those type of circumstances. So the first major use case is Neuralink, where this is this is a monumental. This is going to be a huge change to in communication forever. We'll essentially be able to speak telepathically like Professor X, and the the difference is so big. For example, to now just to text, which is basically the fastest. If we're not speaking on the phone, it's the fastest form of communication. It goes from our brains to our thumbs to then our phones to then it has to travel over the internet depending on your latency as well, so your internet speed. Then it goes to your phone. The information from your phone has to travel through the air to your eyes, and then we process it in our brains. However, can you imagine a world where it just goes from my brain to your brain? One of the threats of this is that our perception of time could be warped. We could have said, yes, we've had a good conversation on a daily stand up, and we could have done that in 1 second. So the lines will start getting a bit blurred in terms of virtual, digital reality and physical reality. However, some of the advantages and benefits is that people with prosthetic limbs who have lost limbs will be able to control them mentally. So it will give them a better quality of life. It could also revolutionize the teaching industry, because a lot of the times is that we speak the same language, but our understanding of the language is different. But if we can talk through our minds, we might be able to understand how to communicate with each other better and relay information with each other better. This could also revolutionize healthcare diagnosis. For example, if your doctor has a Neuralink and they've made technology where it can simulate pain and sensation. A lot of the time where there's misdiagnosis because your doctor doesn't actually know what's wrong with you, or the patient can't effectively describe the problem of what they're feeling. So imagine a world where the doctor could feel what you're feeling and think, okay, yes, I've trained for this. I know this is what this is. I'll prescribe this. However, another threat of this AI is we're entering the age of transhumanism, where essentially we're already cyborgs because we live with technology where everyone uses their phone on their day-to-day life. However, it becomes a slippery slope once we can't actually detach from it because it's in us. And we might lose what it is to be human. For example, when we're texting, sometimes we find something kind of funny. We say LOL, however, we don't actually laugh. So then if I can telepathically LOL to you, will I need to show you, if I'm in person, will I need to show you that I'm laughing? Then that's when we start losing our social cues, facial expressions. These are the things that make us human almost. And also, could they hack your brain now? If I can control things with my mind, I can talk to you in my mind. Can you listen to what I'm thinking? Can you access my thoughts? So it's a very slippery slope. The next thing, which is gaining popularity, is deep fakes and fake news. During the pandemic, we had a lot of fake news talking about the vaccines, 5G, things like that. And this is only going to blur the lines even more because with social media, text is always subject to debate. However, videos have been concrete evidence, they've been proof. However, now people are going to be able to doctor videos to a level where we wouldn't even be able to tell if they're genuine or not. So then, in this age of information and where we have an abundance of information, we're actually losing the ability to tell what's real from what's fake. And can any of you guess whether which one was who? Well, yeah, his face was Tom Cruise's face was imposed on his face, and now problems like this is, say if there's a politician on a campaign, there can be fake news, a deep fake that ruins his campaign. Bad news travels 3 times faster than good news. By the time it's come out that yes, this is a deep fake, it's fake news, the damage would have already been done. Okay, now loss of privacy. Um, I don't want to put my tin hat on here, but I want to explore the the ways that the threats of loss of privacy with AI. So please follow along. Mass surveillance. A lot of the time online when we talk about your data being shared and how our data is a commodity, I always say if I have nothing to hide, why should I care? And to me, that it's like you're asking, why should I be free? Why shouldn't I not want to be followed? Essentially, um, in in the world that we're going to be living in with AI, and being made, they can surveilled. CTV could be surveilled. Siri and Alexa, Amazon, they've got lawsuits. Amazon and Apple from lawsuits from listening to customers, and even AI to pass the data from our cookies. That blue book I just found ironic, where it could allude to things like Facebook. However, um, there's questions that we ask. For example, could we end up being the world's largest data set? The world's most powerful AI right now is the GPT-3. And how is that AI trained? It trains itself. It crawls the internet. So what we have here is art imitating life in a sense, where soon AI could train itself from looking at social media of people, and then it could learn how to imitate people better, and as a result, mirror people's consciousness, for example, or how people behave. And I want to give an example of this mass surveillance that's already happening now. For example, WeChat. So in China, WeChat is the app for everything. It's social media. It's used for payments, for example, with over 1 billion monthly active users. And WeChat's analyzed, tracked, and shared with the Chinese authorities upon request as part of their mass surveillance network in China. It's also used to censor information, and it tracks the information going out to know what to censor when about the data that comes in. And by 2020, the amount of camera surveillance in China is expected to reach 626 million. And this is being accelerated with the mass surveillance is being implemented at accelerated rate because of the pandemic, which has gave us a reason to do so. For example, if we look today, because masks were mandatory, we had technology to tell if you could wear masks. Now people get vaccines and we don't need masks anymore. Are they going to remove the software? London is the most surveilled city after cities in China. And during the lockdown, during the pandemic, we also started implementing 5G a lot more. And 5G was spoke about coronavirus and things like that. However, 5G is more important for AI. And because it transmits data at a highly faster rate, so AI can work better. So what we will see here is with the implementation of 5G and the infrastructure it builds, what will happen is that AI will be able to be used more commonly, for example. So once we have a full 5G infrastructure, that is when we'll be able to have autonomous cars, for example. But yeah, that's my presentation. One, whether we think AI is going to be good or bad, there's one thing that we know for sure, and that is it's going to change the world forever as we know it. Thank you.